A few years ago, they used to do the SQL Quiz Bowl thing where people would be invited up on the past summit stage, like at the reception. And one year I was up there, Kevin Klein and I were one of the teams, and then the other teams were Paul and Kim, and I can't remember who the other team was. But the questions, I was like, it's like they were written for Paul and Kim. It was all IAM, SGAM pages, all these crazy internal trivia.
Yeah.
And then one of them was like, if you add up all the numeric song titles from whatever Smashing Pumpkins record it was that had 1979 on it, if you add up all the numeric song titles, what's the sum? And I'm like, 1980. And they're like, how did you know that fast? I'm like, well, everybody knows there's 1979. And I figured if you said add, there must be another one, and the other one is probably 1. So.
Oh, look at that.
They were a little disappointed in my answer. They're like, you don't actually know that? And I'm like, no, I just guessed. The only point we got, too. Paul and Kim got like every other single thing there was. Huge.
Yeah, I never liked that thing. I never liked the Quiz Bowl. It was, it was like, oh wow, it's I'm going somewhere else.
I really like the way Intersections does it. So Intersections, all the presenters can write their own questions, and then they hand them into Paul, and Paul kind of morphs them and adds in extra point stuff. And then they have a whole room of people. You sit down at tables, and you play together as a table, and the table with the highest score gets to pick prizes. But the presenters are not allowed to help. And so what we do is we come up with the most offensive answers we possibly can. Just write down truly awful things, because Paul was grading the answers there for a while. And my goal was always to make him cry, just make him laugh so hard that he wouldn't be able to stop crying. And I did it successfully 2 years in a row, and then he made me stop taking part.
Banned from Jeopardy.
Yeah. These answers were so bad. I can't even give you one example of them because they were all so blue. This is also when Jeremiah and Kendra were going in as well with me too. So.
Oh boy.
Yeah, we were offensive. I was like at game night at PASS, you can't even bring Cards Against Humanity. You can't bring Cards Against Humanity because it's too blue.
No one would know who Jeremiah is.
Someone may hear.
Who is Jeremiah Peshka? Yes.
I don't like Cards Against Humanity because I just think it's a bad game. I
think it's
so
fun.
repetitive.
Yeah, you can only play through it once, and then you're really kind of done. You play through the cards once, and it's fun to see people's faces turn red. Like I really loved playing it with people that I knew but didn't know. We had a great time playing it with my parents. Seeing my parents. Just you say some of the filthy things inside there. That was good. And we're playing it with employees too. That was fun. But yes, no one's ever going to look at us as a gold standard for human resources. So I guess we might as well go ahead and get started with the technical questions here. Tom says, are foreign keys compatible with clustered column store indexes? Are you allowed to do foreign keys with column store indexes?
I think, remember that was like 2014, you couldn't.
Yeah, he's getting some kind of error, he says, in Object Explorer. He's getting an error. Column store index cannot be created on a table with a foreign key column. However, if you hit OK, it creates the clustered column store index. My guess is maybe you might even have an older version of SSMS where you're running into this. I haven't seen that for sure. And it may be creating the column clustered column store index and ripping out the foreign key. Who knows? I'm not. We've had the discussion before about should you have foreign key relationships in a data warehouse. Well, let me rephrase this question to that. Should you use foreign keys in a data warehouse?
I generally don't care, and I usually err on the side of no. Just because when you're like doing ETL and you're loading stuff, I don't want the extra overhead of having to check that, especially when you like get to the size of a data warehouse where ETL processes really start to matter. Like you hit the terabyte plus size, you don't want every single load to be, checking over millions to billions of rows for foreign key integrity. Or even like unique constraints are another one that I would avoid in there too. It's just like at that size, the benefit you get from column store far outweighs the benefit that you would get from unique constraints or foreign keys.
Yeah, I'm with you. Richie, any thoughts?
Should be taken care in the OL2P.
Yeah. I've had so many gotten burned so many times with data warehouse that I'll have a bad file, and I want the rest of the files to still load, because I only want to load the file that had the error. I'm going to load that again later just by itself, but I don't want to stop other tables from loading just because I had one error in one file. I have such a limited nightly window. I'd rather get it out and done fast.
Yeah.
And especially since you said column store indexes, that made me think it's a reporting system. It's probably not a transactional system. And somebody just had, I believe, yeah, Erik had a post this week about join elimination too. Like,
yeah,
one of the people that, foreign key join elimination, I'm so happy when it happens, but it's so rare, compared to other performance tweaks I can get.
It's a nice touch. Like I appreciate the amount of time and PhD students that Microsoft has thrown at the optimizer to get it to, like, be as sort of like lazy as possible and to, like, get rid of that stuff as early in the plan as possible. It's like just not even thinking about it. It was a touch on it a little bit at my session at SQL Saturday, New York, and I was doing the optimizer demo. They touched on join elimination and stuff like that a little bit. Like, it's really cool. Like, I think it's awesome, but, like, I also just don't count on it, because who knows what some noodlehead is going to do to mess it up. So it's not like I'm designing stuff to be like, this is going to perfectly eliminate joins every single time. I'm like, this will probably happen most of the time, some of the time, somewhere in there.
And all it takes is one cumulative update where they tweak something, and then all of a sudden you don't get it anymore. It's nuts. Daryl asks, he says, so we're getting started with SQL Server virtualization on Hyper-V clusters. Daryl, what year is this? Holy cow, you're just now getting started.
And Hyper-V, like, of all the choices.
I wasn't going to go there, but I don't know the last time that we had a Hyper-V. Yeah. Yeah, I don't know the last time we had a Hyper-V client.
I had one, I want to, at least a year ago. But it was to the point where I was just like, so let's look at some performance metrics. And they were just like,
we can't.
Yeah, you got some? I'll buy some from you. Some metrics that fell off a truck.
Oh, it's so bad. So for those of you who haven't done this, yeah, paints it on with paint. For those of you who haven't played around with it before, VMware, at least, whenever you're looking at perfmon counters inside the guest, you can see data about the host, and it automatically updates as you move from host to host. You can see things like how much CPU the other guests are using, how long you're waiting for CPU time. Hyper-V, it's left as an exercise for the reader. You got to go monitor all the hosts, and then you got to correlate back to which guest was running on which host at which time. Ain't nobody got time for that. So Daryl says, my server admin says we can pre-allocate CPUs, or we can set the VM to dynamically allocate CPUs. What do you recommend?
Come on, man, this is your SQL Server. Why would you you realize you have to pay for them whether they're dynamically assigned or not, right? They're not. You're like, Microsoft isn't saying like, oh, well, we can take $7,000 off this month. They didn't dynamically assign that. No, assign the number of cores you need, adjust as necessary. That's the beauty of virtualization. You get to figure that stuff out. You could, like, prep your machine if you know something big and bad is going to happen. If you have like a Black Friday sale or Christmas or I don't know, whatever holidays you people sell stuff for. It's nice to be able to pre-allocate those kind of resources to a machine. Same thing also, just because I use VMware for my home lab, like I wouldn't use it for production anything, but like when I do home lab stuff, I use VMware. Over in the memory setting, make sure that's not dynamic, or if you leave it dynamic, make sure that I forget what the term is, but there's like a percentage down at the bottom. You want to have that up to like 80-90%, because you don't want, because I just remember like doing some load testing on SQL servers in the past that were on Hyper-V. Like when I would leave the memory buffer percentage at I think its default is like 20%, things didn't go well. like Blitz cache wouldn't run. I thought there was like a bug, or I had to massively messed up XML or something. No, it was just as soon as I checked that up to 80 or 90, everything ran really quickly. So that's another little slider to be careful of.
My whole problem with
VMware.
dynamic CPU and dynamic memory is they both default to relatively low numbers. So you want to, so when you use the idea of dynamic CPU and dynamic memory, they're going to default to say 2 cores and 8 gigs of RAM. What happens if your VM restarts? What happens if you do a patch? What happens if you have a failure and for some reason it moves from one host to another and you start at an artificially low number? Sure, someday it's going to spin up and use more, but do you really want to deal with crappy performance at that time?
It's almost like another layer of CPU C states. Where it's like you have to like get the CPUs and then they have to spin up and then they get before they'll move on. It's crazy.
Steve followed up and he said that sounded like Erik said no VMware in production. I don't think that's what he meant.
No. VMware is like I would the standard, right? I would like if I had to do anything virtualized like in production where things mattered, I would use VMware. I would not be using Hyper-V. Like that's just how I feel about it.
Yeah, I know it was a good sell for a while because it was cheap, but I don't know that they won that race.
Yeah, just like the VMware, like the tooling, the management stuff, the like the insights into what your guests are doing, like all the metrics you can collect about things. Like it's all centralized in vSphere. It's really nice and it's well worth the cost to have all that extra stuff. Unless you just don't need it. If you don't need it, go ahead, VMware away. Hyper-V away. But if I had to do anything serious, it would be VMware.
I always hear the Microsoft folks, the people who are really hardcore fanboys, will also say, well, you can get all of that with System Center. You just have to build it yourself. Well, yeah, but this is the year 2018. I don't have the time to build myself something, and I'm going to do a really crappy job of it when I go and build it, from scratch. And then when I walk out on vacation, all of a sudden I got all these problems when I come back because somebody broke all my stuff. Daryl asks, he says, all my 51 SQL Server instances are owned by the same Active Directory account. Is this terrible?
Not as long as nothing happens to that Active Directory account.
A great story there. I had one company I was working for, one of our employees was really pissed off and they left, and they just happened to know that all of the SQL servers were running under the same service account. It was set up that way long before I got there. I don't know that I would have known anything different at the time. And what this person did was they went to Outlook Web Access and they tried to log in with the SQL Server account on purpose, and they repeatedly used the wrong password on purpose, thereby locking out the SQL Server service account across all of my SQL servers. That was a good time. So
I salute them. Ingenuity.
I was so impressed, and the guy immediately knew that it worked because all our websites went down. Like, oh, God, that was brutal.
So did you just unlock the account, or did you have to like change the password? Like, did you have to change?
The AD guys immediately went, after we figured out what was going on, that the thing was getting locked out, because I'm like, I'm not doing anything. I don't understand why it's getting locked out.
Yeah.
So they set it so that it could never be locked out again. But then at the same point, I'm like, well, now somebody could just roll through and try every password over time. They have all the time in the world. So now I got to start separating all the services on a different service account.
Which is no fun. That's like no way that a DBA should be spending their time.
No return on investment there.
No. End users are not like, woohoo, he did it. Yes, thank you. Thank you, DBA Brent.
And I didn't even notice anything happened.
Yeah. Oh. Everything's just as slow as it ever was.
Yeah, he did it. He made no difference.
Yeah. Daryl follows up with, I had a contractor change all of my database owners to SA. Is that okay?
I prefer that. I'm being honest about things.
Yeah.
So like, it's not like if you have an agent job owned by an AD account, the AD account gets screwed. They're like, the agent job might start failing or whatever. It's just, as far as like when I think about users that I want to have elevated permissions on a database, I want to be able to assign those. I don't want them to just have them because they're the database owner. So having all the database owners be SA just makes that a little bit more like clean and clear cut to me. And then I can assign, like if that user needs SA on the database, I can give it to them, but they don't just have it like they're not going to be able to like fist fight SA for things.
And I think the public should hear too, in terms of how we handle database security at our company. Right now, there are changes that I need to make inside the database, and I can't do it because I'm not sysadmin on the database. I don't even have write access to most of the tables, and I love that. I'm just like, something screws up, it's not going to be because I fat-fingered an update statement because I don't have permissions to do it.
You give all the security stuff to Richie's German side.
Yeah, they gave all the permissions to the guy who's never been a DBA with like one day in his life. This makes perfect sense.
And he's doing the query tuning today too. Steven says, do y'all have any recommendations for replication disaster recovery, or is there anything that I should do besides just reinitializing replication from scratch?
I would argue with your use of replication for disaster recovery, Steven.
I think what he means, and I'm going to go out on a limb, I think what he means is he has replication, and when he fails over to DR, he just wants to figure out how he's going to make it working again.
Oh, yeah, I don't know then.
I don't either.
Yeah. Like capital R replication, it's like I don't know anything about it, and I want to keep it that way because everything I hear about it is awful. It's like, I don't know, like Dallas Barbecue. Like, I've never been there. It's a restaurant chain in New York. There's a few of them. People in there don't look happy. I've never heard anyone coming out of there be like, oh, that was the best barbecue I've ever had. I just kind of walk by them and say, like there, by the grace of God, go I, like not eating. I'm going somewhere else.
People are drinking in there not because they're happy, but because they're sad.
Yeah, and like there's like big drinks that clearly came out of like a machine with like a little pour handle on it. Nothing, like not anything that anyone cared about.
Yep, that sounds up. I think the only person on the team who's ever done replication is I've played around with it, but not really done serious support in production. Tara, and she's very vehement that she does not want to support replication again either. So
replication is so bad that it made her love availability groups. So just leave it at that.
It's like some kind of Stockholm syndrome. You're not as bad as the kidnapper who made me deal with replication. Ronnie asks, I was reading an article on updating table statistics using the update command. What? The author mentioned flushing the cache after updating stats using DBCC free proc cache. What the hell?
You should fire that author.
Yeah, who you should paste in and who that author was, Ronnie, if you remember. We're not going to mention their name on the air, but we're going to make fun of them privately. He says, now I know that updates the cache at the server level, but I'm not sure if that's a good idea or not. What are your thoughts on running DBCC free proc cache?
Do you want to go first?
Would you like me to?
I don't care. No, it's fine.
I don't have a problem with it if somebody wants to do it because they think it's going to solve a problem. The problem is with parameter sniffing. Every new query that comes in from that point forward is getting optimized for whatever values someone happens to pass in. It's like playing a whole lot of games of Russian roulette all at once. You're just randomly spinning the barrel with whatever parameters get passed into a stored proc. I don't like playing Russian roulette. I would rather not play that if I could, so I would rather just coach the people into, hey, what do you think you're fixing by running that command, and let me see if I can fix it another way that doesn't involve so many pistols pointed at my head.
I mean, that is like Russian roulette with a Gatling gun. Guaranteed.
Yes.
Like one of those is just going to be it. So like, I think my problem with it is that it's like a very heavy-handed way of fixing a problem that's probably pretty narrowly scoped. So like, it's just like scorching the earth when, you just need to pull a few weeds, I think. When you update stats anyway, if you had plans that were, referencing them, they would be invalidated and likely recompile anyway, so there's not a whole lot of value in also wiping out every other plan in the cache, along with the ones that would be affected by the stats update. So stats update, yes. Free proc cache, probably not. There are ways to target free proc cache to a specific like SQL handle or whatever, so that you can not go to a specific plan from cache, which is preferable to just wiping out the whole thing, because they most likely don't have a problem with the entire plan cache, just a few little pieces of it for stuff like Brent said with the parameter sniffing.
Brent, why are you always so violent with the Russian people? I don't understand.
and the mafia.
Did the Russian go call you a sabaka or something? I don't understand.
The mafia and the gun jokes. And I've been more cognizant of that lately. Like all of a sudden I hear how many times I make gun references and all. And you would think that I'm some kind of like violence person. I don't watch boxing. I don't own a gun. I never have. I fired a shotgun once, and that was enough for me. I never want to do that
Still has
again.
a bruise from it.
Yeah, yeah. These are not large arms. You know, recoil is not a word that's friendly to me. Oh, God. Like, damn, that was loud. If I want to hear something that loud, I'd go to a Metallica concert, which I do. I mean, I like hearing things that loud, but you know, I don't want to have to blow back on my arm whenever I do that. Daryl asks, I wanted my contractor. Daryl, why would you have a contractor? I wanted my contractor to change my job ownership. It's probably the same contractor Richie's using. To the job ownership to the same Active Directory account that owns the databases, but he changed the job ownerships to SA. Is that okay? Was I wrong to begin with? Who should usually own jobs?
I'm done with SA owning the jobs.
Yeah, I want the jobs to work even if some yo-yo leaves the company, locks their login, you know, if we disable someone's login because they're having problems.
Yeah. So have you ever run into a position where you needed like a specific Active Directory account that would have permissions? Let's say you had to access like a file share way off in no man's land, and you needed a specific account to do it. Have you ever run into that? Because like that might be when you don't want SA.
Yes, I have with agent jobs. I've had like where I needed to deal with a specific file target, but I just gave the agent account permissions on that target. But that helps when I have a different agent account per server, though, too. Because if I had the same agent account across all my servers, that would suck.
Yep.
Suck is a strong word there, but
less than ideal.
I would want to know, Daryl. I would want to know more about the account that you wanted to use that wasn't SA and why you wanted to use it. I don't think we'd have a problem with that either. If you had like a special AD account that you wanted to use for job ownerships, I think we'd be okay with that.
Yeah, just let us know the URL to your domain, and we'll get the user ID, and we'll try to lock it out.
We'll check the password length for you. Just send us that. Ron asks a very hard question. Why would I want to go to SQL Azure? Richie, Richie, why would you like to go to SQL Azure?
I wouldn't. I don't know. I guess it depends on the app that I'm building, right? If I need OLTP and I need to use Azure, well, that's probably the game that I'm going to need to go to. It's not bad. I've personally never used it outside of just toying around with it. But if you're familiar with SQL Server and you have to use Azure, go for it. Other than that, I'd probably just want to stay on-prem. If I have to go to the cloud, do you need to go to SQL Server? Do you need OLTP? I mean, there's a lot of questions that need to be asked. Because now in the cloud, I could have any sort of database that I need, and that's a big bonus because now I can custom tailor my needs as the application to what data store is out there in the cloud. I can get them all. In fact, we have got an application that's using multiple. We're using object data store and we're using OLTP.
Yeah, there's one really narrow use case. Say that you've already got an application built and it doesn't go across multiple databases, like it doesn't do cross-database queries, and you don't want to host it on premises, you want it up in the cloud with as little application changes as possible, and you don't use any of the features that Azure SQL DB doesn't allow. Agent jobs, for example, log shipping to other on-premises servers, then that would be the use case where I would go if I wanted that hosted in somewhere that was really reliable and not in my company's data center. It makes sense. But the instant that you trip to anything that Azure SQL DB doesn't support, cross-database queries the native way, agent jobs, all these other little features, then Azure SQL DB isn't as good of a fit. Azure managed instances are a much more interesting fit. You just got to make sure that the pricing makes sense for you and that their limitations, like the number of replicas you have, make sense for you as well.
Yeah, I think Azure managed instances are going to change people's opinions about Azure pretty generally. There was a T-SQL Tuesday that was not well attended. There were like 2 posts on it 'cause it was about like tell us about your like whatever experience you have with Azure. And there just wasn't a whole lot of people being like, "Ooh, let me tell you," just because it's not a whole heck of a lot of adoption, especially I don't even know how to put I don't even know the right word for it. Like I guess like as far as people who are like frequent SQL bloggers, no one's just like hooray Azure, my hero, you solved this massive problem for me. Sorry, my backup band is here. But yeah, but managed instances I think are going to change a lot of that. Managed instances have a lot of cool features about them. They're like, sort of hybrid. It's like you get like agent jobs and a whole bunch of other stuff that you don't get with Azure SQL DB. There's a lot of good stuff about them. And like the hardware behind them is pretty beefy too. So you can like, put non-trivial applications up there and have them, run pretty well, I think.
Stephen asks, why do you guys hate on replication? Well, I'll be the first answer on this one. So
yes.
I think it's amazing when nothing in the app changes, like when absolutely nothing in the application is ever going to change. Your queries aren't going to change, your tables aren't going to change, your indexes aren't going to change. But the instant that you have any changing in your application, like people add columns or drop columns to tables, they rework tables from scratch, they add stored procs and they drop stored procs, they add new databases. The more that this thing changes, the more fragile replication is and the more maintenance work that you have to put into it. Whereas when you look at alternative techniques like database mirroring, log shipping, always-on availability groups, man, you can put a dinosaur in the database. You can set the database on fire, and it just keeps replicating off somewhere else. Security is less of a concern. Then the other problem that I always ran into it was people go, well, I'm replicating so that I can offload the reporting query somewhere else. Wait, why are my reports 3 hours behind? Well, replication got behind because somebody did a bunch of updates or alter index, changing a bunch of things. It caused it to have to do a new snapshot and reseed over again. Well, that's unacceptable. We needed it to absolutely positively be on time, and it just doesn't work that way. Michael says, replication is a very powerful and useful tool. Yeah, so is a table saw. You just don't see me with one in my office. He says, especially for things like copying data from a prod SQL instance to a prod reporting instance. You offload the reporting query from your prod database, da-da-da-da-da. Yeah, absolutely. It's just the problem is as those tables change, replication is the least set it and forget it solution inside of Microsoft. It is really not set it and forget it.
So like because we've hated on replication plenty, I will give replication 1 point in its favor, and that is that you can have replication move stuff over, and then you can have like a postscript run that adds like different indexes for reporting. So like with an AG, with mirroring, with log shipping, if you have a report that's offloaded and it's kind of running like crap, you don't get to create that index just on the secondary so that you can make that report better there. You need that index on the primary, and that gets replicated over to the secondary. So like that's not great. So replication does have that in its favor. You can index specifically for whatever crazy Cucamonga reporting queries you have going on. So that's nice. That's a nice touch with replication. But I would rather use almost anything else that's like less fragile, less prone to, I don't want to have to send out tracer tokens and figure out what's slow where. It's just no thanks.
Not replicating deletes is another pro for it. You can,
sure.
Only have your deletes happen on the production environment and not push them off to a secondary. So you can have a small primary and then a really large secondary. That's cool too. All right, and on that bombshell, we will leave. Thanks everybody for hanging out with us this office hours, and we will see y'all next week. Adios.